Welcome to Politics Done Right. I'm Egberto Willis, your host. Good morning, Houston. Good morning, Houston. It's the first day of the week. Happy Monday. We are going to make this week a wonderful week. We are going to make this week a great week because you know what, folks? It is where it is in our hands. For the most part, yes, there are exceptions to the rule, but it is in our hands. Let's take the power that we have innately and make this our hour, make this our day, make this our semana, our week. Let's make sure and make it that way. How was your weekend? I trust your weekend was fine. If it wasn't fine, let's go ahead and repair what needs to be repaired to make it fine.
Not
anyway,
long enough.
Not long. Oh, Howard, I know, you're always on the go, but I'm pretty sure you had a good enough weekend, right? I had a we are here on the positive. I had a wonderful weekend, and one of the reasons that it became even so much more wonderful is I met for the first time one of the guys in our control room. We are a volunteer organization with people coming in from the community from all over that make a part of what we call community radio, which is really, really, really community radio. And I met no other than the person who mans the phones every single morning, the one and only El Senor Jack Van Beber. Jack, is he in the studio right now as well? I trust.
Yes, I'm right here.
We had a great time. And, after speaking to Jack and getting some of Jack's own wisdom, Jack came up and said, Egberto, I have a lot of things that I write down about what's going on in today's society. And the man came with a book full of stuff that he writes down. So I said, you know what? We're going to have that good old Jack Van Beber's Minute. Do you have a word of wisdom for us this morning, Senor Jack?
Yes, it's more of a question.
Yes.
We were talking about the authority of God and everything this weekend a little bit. And I thought, if it were proven that God did not exist, would the human still be a spiritual being? Is spirituality separate from God? That was my question. That's my question of the day.
And what do you guys think? Those of you that are listening out there, what does El Senor Howard think? Howard, would we still be a spiritual people?
Yes, we would. Because if God didn't exist, there was absolute proof, we would invent him. Because we have to have something bigger than ourselves. It's just a human. We have to have something bigger than ourselves. Look at the way we grow up. When we're children, our parents are bigger than we are. So we have to have something that we think is in charge, whether it is or not. I'm not saying that it is. I'm not saying it isn't. But we have to have something bigger than ourselves to behave ourselves, really.
I agree with that 100%. I'm a humanist, and I think I'm very spiritual. I think about, and I think being spiritual also shows a certain level of humbleness, right? Because it tells you that the world doesn't center around you, and you understand that there must be something out there. I mean, we couldn't do this on our own. Hell, we couldn't do one millionth of what we see out there. Anytime I go on a cruise or something and I see the vastness of the ocean and I see things happening, it makes one feel so little. When I go out there and I camp on a lake or on the forest, the beautiful forest we have all over Texas and beyond, it's like, wow, this is great. It has to be a lot more out there. So, Dr. Van Beber, I tell you something. I think the question is profound, and I think all of us should think about it. And in thinking about how vast things are, right? I think it should give us a humility that we should all cherish, to put it bluntly. Your thoughts, Jack?
Well, it really didn't happen by happenstance. There's a big design in the world. Now, just exactly what everyone's role is, well, you find your way. You found your way. I found my way. Jack found his way. We all do. We all have an assignment to complete here.
Absolutely.
And once it's done, well, you're done.
You got that right. You got that right. Anyhow, folks, in the studio, we want to thank El Senor Jack Van Bever for manning the phones. And, of course, Howard Reynolds for keeping this station up running with what he likes to call the tins and the strings and tins, or all that good stuff out there
tin
to make it work.
String.
The tin cans and string. Oh. And you know what? That's what we do. We make things happen on this great 100,000 watt station. Anyhow, folks, we have a great program for you today. And remember, I have to remind you all, this is your program. I repeat, that is not just hyperbole. That is not just for the saying. This is your station. I prepare at least 3 subjects or so every day. But if you call and want to change a subject, that's something that has more meaning for your life, for the lives of many around, it is your program. Give us a call at 713-526-5738, 713-526-5738. We are here to serve. I repeat, we are here to serve. Look, there are several ways that you can get to our program. You can tune us in at 90.1 FM Houston on your dial, the good old-fashioned way. You can download the program, tune in from either Android or Apple, and search for KPFT, and you can stream us directly from the app on your phone or on your computer. We can also stream us from our website, kpft.org, kpft.org, or you can watch us live right now at facebook.com/KPFT Houston. Again, that is facebook.com/KPFT Houston. And of course, you can watch us live on YouTube by simply going to politicsdoneright.tv. Politicsdoneright.tv. We're here to serve you. Please call early. Don't wait till the end of the program where we are having to rush folks to get to the next caller, etc. 713-526-5738. Again, that number is 713-526-5738. Title of the show today, Rattner deconstructs debt ceiling. Ayman Mohyeldin roasts Christie, a GOP senator, kids, and Jesus. It's amazing that kind of interesting that as I gave it that title, that Van Bever will come in and say spirituality. Interesting. All right. Subtitle: Steve Rattner deconstructs the debt ceiling agreement. Ayman Mohyeldin roasts former Governor Chris Christie as he hypocritically challenges Trump, and the GOP senator shows his ignorance about race. And it's what Joyanne Reed did to him that I think is noteworthy. Anyway, folks, let's go ahead and get started with the first part, and that is a journalist. Actually, you know what? I want to start on the debt ceiling because that got resolved. The president gave a little speech earlier on, I think, Friday night, where he talked about what it was all about, etc., and why we had to go through it. But Rattner did a deconstruction of the debt ceiling that I think is apropos. So I'll go ahead and play that now. Again, if you want to make comments on this thereafter, 713-526-5738. Again, that is 713-526-5738. Do remember to hit extension 2 so that you can get on air right away. Extension numero 2 so you can get on air right away. In case we don't get through the entire program, you can always find the entire program along with the videos, etc. at politicsdoneright.com/newsletter. politicsdoneright.com/newsletter. Here is the first piece. Let's get what again? Let's get busy. Steve Rattner, there's nothing like charts. Steve Rattner comes out and started to detail exactly what happened in the debt ceiling agreement. And it turns out that after looking at the details, President Biden did even much better than we all thought. And that's important. But he didn't do much better because what was there was all that great. What he did better for is because, again, the Republican had no answers. And the truth of the matter is anything they would have that would have been left in their budget plan would have not only hurt the Democrats, but it would have hurt the Republicans even worse because their people are more dependent on these particular provisions than Democrats are, to put it bluntly. But anyhow, the reason they had to walk away in the long run, it's because the fact that they had nothing to offer. They are performative and they're not really policy wonks that actually go in there and get something done. Check this out from Steve Rattner, and then we'll take it on the other side.
Steve Rattner with his charge. Steve, let's dig into some of the details of this deal. We've talked a lot about the politics. Who got the better of this one?
There were more Republicans who voted against this, against the thing their own speaker had negotiated, than there were Democrats. And it is all, I think, an indication that, in fact, the White House did get the better of the deal. They're not taking a victory lap at the moment because they don't want to upset what looks like a pretty positive course in the Senate. But I think you'll see them perhaps do that at some point because they deserve it. And we can take a look at some of the provisions. Ed mentioned a few of the things, but this is a comparison between the two bills. This is the House GOP bill that they passed. This is what they said they were prepared to have go into law. And this is the deal that ultimately emerged. They wanted to cut domestic spending, non-defense spending, to $555 billion. It would have been 740. It was $744 billion in the current fiscal year. It ended up at 704. Ed mentioned these 10-year caps. This is really important. They wanted to cap this thing for 10 years. They only got 2. And so if the Democrats were to be back in power in 2 years, they can undo as much of this as they want to. He mentioned the IRS clawback. They wanted $80 billion. They got maybe not even $21 billion. I won't get into the weeds on that, but that number could be smaller. And the irony here is that the IRS more money the IRS actually reduces the deficit because then they can collect more from the tax evaders and tax avoiders out there. But nonetheless, most of this was preserved. The Republicans wanted a very broad work requirement. They wanted basically everybody receiving public assistance other than Social Security to be working, and they got a tiny fraction of that. On the student loan situation, where there has been this moratorium, the Republicans wanted every penny of that money paid back. They're not getting any of that. All they're getting is that the freeze that's in existence on student loan repayments would end, which it's going to anyway, and it would restrict the ability to put in another moratorium, which nobody wants to do anyway. So essentially, there's no difference on student loans for what would have happened anyway. No change on taxes on either side. No increases in the loopholes closed. We can discuss whether that's the best idea, but that's where they came out. And then importantly, the Republicans wanted to repeal all of the green energy tax credits in the Inflation Reduction Act. And they got 0 on that provision.
What were the spending cuts really like as you look inside this legislation?
Sure. Let's take a look at that. So as I said before, we can look at the fiscal 2024. That's the next year of non-defense discretionary. That's where all the action was. That's what was on the table. Nothing else was even on the table really to be changed. And so the president in his budget proposed a bit over $800 billion. As I said before, this is the 2023 amount. This is $744 billion. The Republicans wanted it down at this 550 level that we talked about, and ended up here, about $40 billion, as I said, less than what we are going to spend anyway. And then a bit less than, but $110 billion less than the Biden proposal, $145 billion more than the Republican proposal. So we didn't end up in the middle. We ended up on the Biden side of the ledger. And then this one is really important. So as I mentioned a minute ago, the Republicans wanted a lot of these. This is SNAP. This is our food stamp program. The Republicans wanted a lot of these people out there working and a very broad work requirement. They also wanted a work requirement on what we would colloquially call the welfare program. They got absolutely 0 on welfare. On food stamps, all they got was that people between 50 and 54 would have a work requirement, but they exempted veterans. They exempted people with housing problems from all of this. And so there are some numbers coming out suggesting that actually there may be fewer people working, or at least required to work under this, than what we have now.
With us being concerned about the debt, about $31 trillion debt, which Donald Trump's contributed to more than anybody in American history. How does this deal work for us?
Well, look, it's a start. It does reduce the debt and deficit over the long term. But let's just take a look at some of the history that you referred to, Joe, and I think you'll see what the magnitude of the problem is. So this is our history of revenues and expenses on a national basis. And all this stuff in the middle is deficit, which becomes debt. If you go back to the late 90s, remember that under in the Clinton years, we actually had a surplus for a few years. And then we got into the financial crisis and it all ballooned. Then we started working it down. And then Trump shows up right here. And since Trump showed up, what's happening? The deficit and the debt gets larger. Obviously, there was COVID, but even before there was COVID, you had the Trump tax cuts, which were supposed to pay for themselves. And instead, you can see revenues going down here as a percentage of GDP. On the spending side, for all the brave talk, spending actually started to go up even before the COVID spike. And so all this pink stuff between these two lines, all this pink stuff are deficits and debt that Trump added to our problem. Under Biden, you can see outlays starting to come down, revenue starting to go up. We're starting to get that deficit down. This will help, but it is a big problem in which Trump was a contributor, not a helper toward getting to a lower deficit picture. But we shouldn't also forget, Joe.
Steve Rattner point out something that is very interesting. Like we've been preaching for quite some time, tax cuts don't pay for themselves. In fact, tax cuts negatively affect the economy in most cases that we've done thus far because we've given tax cuts when there should have been no reason to give them. Supply side doesn't work because if you want more economic activity, you throw the money into the hands of people that are going to spend it and not people who may or may not invest it. And even if they invest it, they don't invest it in things that people really want. Again, the only democratic form in which to give tax cuts is to give tax cuts to the people who need the monies the most and would throw it right back into the economy. That in the aggregate is what should be done. As far as the debt ceiling debate, the debt ceiling, it will only get reduced when we start taxing people appropriately. That we are overtaxed and all that kind of stuff, given the services that we provide, given the military that we have, etc. We're just not correctly taxed. Again, if you want a big, humongous military, if you want a state that gives all kinds of benefits to corporations, if you want all these things, great infrastructure, you have to pay for it. And that is the responsible thing to do. You cannot cut social programs as your method of balancing the budget. You must get the taxes to where they need to be, especially since most of the monies at the top was not really earned, but that's for another day. You know, I want to mention something because there's something that may come across a little bit concerning in that clip that I did a few nights ago, and it's the following. As I re-listened to it, I said I want to clear up something because the Democrats didn't want to have a work requirement for welfare in there, and some people would say, well, why not? If they're able-bodied people getting welfare and they can work, they should be going out there to work. That is the sentiment of everybody, whether you are Republican or Democrat. We don't want somebody on the dole for the sake of wanting somebody on the dole. The issue is the bureaucracy that work requirements create. In other words, if you have all these work requirements, you have to hire a whole lot of other people to administer and to find out that the person is going to work and all that sort of stuff. It adds to the budget of that particular program, a budget that instead of going all to the people of need, also goes to the people that are there to administer these things. And what we are saying is poor people don't need a work requirements because in as much as there are bombs out there, in as much as there are people out there who don't want to work, right? Who want to be on the dole. There are some people out there that are that way. But you know what? Most people are not. Most people hate the idea of being poor. Most people want to have a livable wage. Most people want the dignity of going out to work there every single day. That you can show a few people here and there that don't want to work or a cluster of people that don't want to work. That is the very, very slim minority of people out there. If you doubt me, you go to any poor area, to the bus stations, etc. And in the mornings just before work, there are people trying to get to work in every manner that they can. The normal way of one's being is to want to be out there working. Don't let right-wingers try to make scapegoats out of people, whether Democratic or Republican. So let's keep that in our back of our heads. It's easy when this stuff is not explained for people to believe there are just a whole lot of lousy people out there. I beg to differ. I've driven through Appalachia and people are at the bus stops. I've driven through the ghettos and people are at the bus stop. I've driven through the barrios and people are on the bus stop. It is a fallacy to believe that people don't want to work. But let's go a bit further. We don't ask, when we gave away PPP to businesses, we didn't ask them we didn't create a huge bureaucracy to go ahead and make sure that the millions of dollars that we've given these people, somehow they qualified for. When we give huge tax cuts, we don't go out there and monitor folks as we should to verify that they, in fact, deserve the tax cuts that they have. But when it comes to very poor people, when it comes to the middle class, we want them to prove every single penny that they get. And in so doing, what we're doing is minimizing the funds that we would normally put into the program to make sure that we have those who are there monitoring and governing. We need to get smart about these issues. Let's go ahead and bring David into the conversation. David, how are you doing this morning? David, come on in. Let's see. I don't see it read yet. David, control room. Let's go ahead and get David into the fold. Come on in, David. You're on.
Hey, Mr. Aguero. I just want to bring something to the attention of the listening audience. I've been hearing this Republican trope that by cutting taxes, you increase government revenue. That seems to me to be counterintuitive. And the reason why is because the entirety of government revenue is based on taxes. I don't know of any other way the government makes money than by establishing a tax.
David, let me explain to you what their theory is. And by the way, welcome to Politics Done Right. Melanie Keelan from Barcelona, Spain. Welcome to Politics Done Right. Love having you here, young lady. Anyway, let me tell you what their theory is, and it's a fallacy. And Rattner, in the piece that I just showed you there, actually explained the fallacy. They claim if we give tax cuts, what we do is we generate more economic activity. And if we generate more economic activity, more taxes will be collected on that economic activity that supersedes the amount of tax, the tax cuts that we give. It has never, I repeat, that has never, ever been true. And even in the last $1.4 trillion tax cut that Donald Trump gave, Steve Rattner just showed the chart that even before COVID occurred, people can say, well, Donald Trump ballooned the budget because of that huge tax cut of the pandemic. That's not what started the rise of our deficit under Trump. When Trump gave that $1.4 trillion tax cut, the revenues tanked. And Steve Rattner's chart, for those who are watching the program and not just listening to the programs, that stuff tanked. Our revenue tanked. Our deficit exploded. People have to stop buying the fallacy that right-wingers say, that they say it somehow makes it true. I love numbers. That's what we do, David. Numbers. And the numbers from the days of tax cuts, even under Reagan, have proven false. Reagan's economy exploded not because of tax cut, but because of Keynesian economics by cutting taxes and at the same time ballooning the defense budget and social programs. We have to start accepting the truth and listening to the truth and looking at the numbers which are out there for all to see. Republicans make the assumption that you will decide to just listen to them and remain uninformed. Go ahead, David.
Well, one of the things about Reagan, now, I don't know, to me, speech is an important aspect of communication. Reagan talks about this thing. His way he put it was, he called it trickle-down economics.
Yes.
And I considered, what is the word trickle? And
a little bit. That's
right. It's a tiny little peep, 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 peep. And this is what Reagan had planned for those of us in the 99%. It was a huge gusher upward toward the rich and a tiny trickle downward. And then you ask yourself, how the hell is that going to increase tax revenues when in fact Reagan's idea was to, just like Mike Hickabee with his maximum wage, that his intention was that he was going to establish a policy that would allow those of us on the bottom rungs to make no more than a certain amount of income. And this was put forth by some English guy back in the 1500s, I think. I'm not sure.
Right.
Edmund Burke anyway, this and Hickabee picked up on that, and he was making a big issue out of it. So the Republican, and this is the thing about the libertarian system also, they have been anti-tax as far back as I can remember.
Exactly.
It's not. So in the context of the claim that, well, if we make more money, then it'll increase taxes. How can that be when they're constantly cutting taxes?
Hey, amen. Look, David, you're right. I need to go to Arnold. David, I appreciate your call. I appreciate your sensible commentary. Please keep listening. Please keep calling. And please remember to tell folks that KPFT 90.1 FM exists and that we're here to provide nothing but the truth. Thank you. Thank you kindly, David. All right, let's get to Arnold. Arnold, come on in. How are you doing, Arnold?
Hello?
Yes, Arnold, you're here.
Hey, yeah, so one of the things I wanted to say was as far as taxes and everything goes, all these subsidies for these corporations, all done legally to benefit these corporations. That's what's hurting everyday Americans, even workers. They need you want to talk about they need a certain percentage of unemployment.
Oh wow! Let me stop you right there, Arnold, because you just hit a key feature that I want every American to understand. You just made a very important statement. Yes, our economic system is dependent on there being a certain amount of unemployment. If you doubt it, remember what the Federal Reserve chair said to Elizabeth Warren. Elizabeth Warren said, wait a minute, you are saying in order to bring down inflation, and by the way, for those who don't know, inflation isn't caused by what Biden is doing with pumping money into the economy. Inflation only should occur if there are shortages. We don't have real shortages. Therefore, the inflation we have today is corporate greed. Don't believe anything else that you've heard. We can prove it. And Katie Porter, Representative Katie Porter of California, she proved that inflation has been caused by corporate greed. But going back to what Arnold had to say about there being unemployment, Arnold is absolutely correct that we depend on unemployment. And the chair of the Fed chair said the following: we need to increase employment in his document. We need to increase unemployment so that we can bring down inflation. He gave a correlation between unemployment and inflation. What kind of an economic system depends on the pain of people to succeed? That's a problem. Continue, Arnold.
It allows the guy next to me to want to work for less than me, in order to survive and the economy. That's why we need to strengthen our unions more. That's the next big thing. Is we need to organize. That's the main thing. I mean, it's white people, black people, Mexicans, everybody. You got immigrants. You got these companies able to give visas to immigrants to bring them onto their farms, to bring them onto their poultry.
The plants, yes.
That you can't see. Us Americans, we're building these factories. Not just that, but now these companies are building factories in overseas and not allowing Americans to get any of that wealth, and so that, all the wealth is going to like everybody's saying on 1%, but we don't know how do we change it?
Let me tell you how we change it. Let me stop you right there, brother Arnold, and let's.
We gotta unionize and legalize.
Yes.
Unionize workers, and we gotta legalize immigrants. So, you know.
And look, Arnold.
Americans, us everyday workers, we're paying our taxes. We're paying our taxes by a check. I mean, even by overtime. Why are you taxing my overtime? You know, that's money that I should be getting just for me. You know what I'm saying? Because I'm putting in those extra hours.
Arnold,
I'm barely learning about an 8-hour workday. You know, in these refineries out here, it's 10 hours, 12 hours a day. Not to mention the time it takes to get into these refineries. You know.
All right, Arnold. Let me stop you a second. Are you there? Let me stop you a second. Here's the deal. You asked, how are we going to solve this problem? We solve this problem doing exactly what you said, unionizing, and also realizing that the problem belongs to us all. Believe it or not, it's not even a black, Mexican, immigration, white thing. It is a we, the people thing. There's a few on the top that creates all kind of issues among us to create dissension so that we don't get to work together. Once we start working together, all of us together, we're going to solve the problem. I got to go to Tori. Arnold, I thank you so kindly for the call. Please keep listening. Please keep calling. Please keep sharing. You have a wonderful rest of your day, sir. All right, let's go to brother Tori. Tori, come on in. How are you doing this morning?
Good. Good morning, Egberto.
You're up again, Tori. You are up.
Hey, got to do some yard work. You got to get up when it's nice and cool.
There you go.
Every once in a while, I see the morning. But, this is about basically the Koch brothers and taxes. This is, again, this is a note from the history department. My thing, I look at things from the long view. And just so you know, in case you forgot, the motivating life for the Koch family, starting in the 1930s, was Charles and David Koch's father, Fred, a rice alum, where the New Deal progressive taxes on the rich. Everything the entire family ever did for the past 90 years was to fight Franklin D. Roosevelt's tax plan. Reagan got in some good stabs, but it was Trump. He was the matador that finally killed the heart of the New Deal, which was the tax code. It's the silver to their vampire heart. It's the only means to cure their disease and heal the nation's social safety net. Is to raise the taxes like Franklin Roosevelt did. We need to do it again. The Koch brothers and the Mercers, not me, the other Mercers, they just fought the Supreme Court via decades of organizing through the Cato Institute and the Federalist Society. These are all institutes that were funded and started, initiated, organized exactly, by the Koch brothers to do what they've been doing. And which is to lower the taxes. Not all billionaires distort, conspire, and pervert democracy, but it only takes a few. They're loose cannons, and they must be tied down to prevent from hurting people. Their wealth is their weapon, and it must be confiscated. We need a rational ratio of wealth between the lowest and highest incomes just to keep the wheels on this compromised attempt at a democracy we call the U.S. We need to increase the minimum wage and decrease the maximum allowable accumulated wealth. Philanthropy or taxes should be the only choice for the billionaire class.
Let me just, I want to interrupt you for a second because you said something that's going to raise a lot of eyebrows. Hold on a second, Tori. You said something that's going to raise a lot of eyebrows, but I completely agree with because let me talk about it.
91% tax rate of the New Deal. The same thing that Franklin Roosevelt did.
All right, Tori, listen, you said something that's going to probably get a lot of folks talking when you say we need to confiscate the wealth of the billionaire. And for those who think that's a harsh statement or that's a thievery type statement, let me forewarn those that there is not one person on this planet, neither the good ones or the bad ones, that deserve, that has earned having $1 billion. I repeat, It is a designed economic system that has allowed the billionaire class to exist. That may sound harsh based on the indoctrination we have received from the inception of our bodies. But the reality from birth, that is, the reality is there is not one person on this planet who has earned $1 billion. They have coerced $1 billion off of the fractional labor of everybody else. Out of the way our economic system. Hold on, let me finish, Tori. Let me finish. How that is what we have to have inculcated in our minds. We have been indoctrinated to believe that somebody has the right to earn a large percentage of our wage base, our economic base, our resource base, and that somehow they are entitled to it. They're not. Go ahead, Tori.
I wouldn't even call it earned. I look at things objectively, and what they've done, what capitalism does is that it concentrates wealth. Okay, so we're not even talking about getting rid of capitalism here, but we got to look at it objectively. It concentrates wealth, and that in itself isn't a bad thing because, we need wealth to do all manner of things, all the things that, that social safety net does. The roads and the schools and the hospitals. We need to concentrate wealth. The problem with folks like the Koch brothers isn't the concentration of wealth, it's the hoarding of wealth. That money needs to be put back into circulation. Franklin Roosevelt had the right plan. The 1% pays a 91% tax rate. So it's fine for them to concentrate the wealth, but they got to put it back in circulation instead of hoarding the wealth. And there's, it comes from this mentality. Remember, these guys started off during the Great Depression, and there's a whole hoarding mentality, not just amongst the rich people, but even among poor people. My mom would keep little scraps of paper, tiny little pieces of paper. She wouldn't throw it away because we got to use everything. And so it's, there's an efficiency to holding on to things. But, at some point it becomes a sickness. And when it comes to billionaires wanting to keep more money than they'll ever possibly need, or their children or great grandchildren will ever possibly need, it's a sickness.
Hey, Tori, I don't want to get into semantics here about the concentration of wealth. An economic system that allows for the concentration of wealth is ill-advised. I think it's important that we don't give a pass to say that the system, yes, it's good for there to be somehow the concentration of wealth. There are systems. One can create a hybridized system that is sufficiently hybridized that it does not allow intrinsically for the accumulation of wealth, unearned wealth. I repeat, unearned wealth.
You get to the same goalpost by just, raising the taxes.
Exactly. Sure. And that's what I mean, Tori. I'm saying the tax system cleans up the aberration of capitalism. So I'm saying if you want the capitalist structure, by all means have it, but have a tax system that removes the aberration that it creates. That's all.
Well, it's not my choice or your choice of whether we're going to have a capitalist system or not. I'm talking about, what we can do now, just very objectively, and what that tax rate did. I mean, we need to see exactly what that 91% tax rate did. The good part about it, it turned the United States into a superpower. It built the international, the national highway system. I mean, it turned the U.S. and, from a, it wasn't quite a third world. I mean, it was industrialized, but it was like, it was a dump. I mean, it was the Great Depression, and there was no infrastructure. There was no social safety net. And we went from this really crappy country limping along to being this amazing superpower. And it was all about that 91% tax rate.
Yeah, that played a big part. Of course, it also played a big part that we rebuilt the world after World War II, and we were the manufacturing engine of the world for a long time. So that played an important part.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So it's very true.
Anyhow, anything else you want to add, Tori, before I go to the next subject?
No, that's it.
Thank you so kindly for. Hey, look, I would like to feel that you woke up in the morning to listen to Politics Done Right, even though I know you wanted to get out and do the yard before it got too hot. But you know what? I'll still take the happiness that I could hear your voice, sir.
Yeah, it's good to hear you too.
You have a wonderful day, Tori. Great information. And as usual, we have our schooled poet. He has some good political poetry that you can find at my website as well. Good political poetry, Tori. You have a wonderful day, sir.
All right. Cheers.
All right, folks. Second subject was what again? A real journalist, Ayman Mohyeldin, roasts Chris Christie for a self-serving run against Trump. Journalist Ayman Mohyeldin roasted former New Jersey Governor Chris Christie for challenging Donald Trump after flip-flopping from being against him and then supporting him and being against him and then supporting him and now being against him again. So Mohyeldin warned the mainstream media to cover Christie's run in the proper context. You know, the one great thing that we have when we have good journalists out there is we get good reporting. So I want you to check this out, and then we'll take it on the other side. By now, we all know that Chris Christie, former governor of New Jersey, said that he's going to get into the race and run for president of the United States, of course, in a Republican primary to challenge former President Trump. Well, his track record isn't good on that in that domain, but he's going to try. Some people think it's going to be great having a Chris Christie there, who is a tough talker, a patriot that's going to go in there to prevent Trump from running again. Well, you know, good journalism is important. And I think people forget the iterations of who Christie is, what Christie represented in the Trump administration. Well, you know who's not going to let you forget? A good journalist. Like whom again? Ayman Mohyeldin. Check this out, and then we'll take it on the other side.
Happy to be on the Trump team. NBC News reports that this week, Trump critic turned Trump ally turned Trump critic again. I guess Chris Christie will enter the 2024 Republican presidential primaries. For months, rumors have swirled around Christie's plans to enter the race, but almost no one believes he can win. And reports suggest that he might not believe that either. Instead, he is focused on what some are calling a kamikaze mission to take down Donald Trump. And in fairness, Christie carried out a similar mission in 2016. He is credited with snuffing out Senator Marco Rubio's presidential prospects after a fierce clash on a New Hampshire debate stage. But he never succeeded in doing the same to Donald Trump. Christie was a fierce Trump attacker early in the 2016 primaries, calling him a carnival barker and unserious entertainer, moonlighting as a politician. He suggested that nominating Trump would actually destabilize the GOP, and he put Hillary Clinton in the White House. And then, once Chris Christie realized that he couldn't actually beat Trump, he had a change of heart, changed his tune. He became one of the first high-profile establishment Republicans to endorse Trump's run, giving Trump a level of legitimacy, I could say, that was previously unattainable. He even vied to be Trump's running mate. And when that didn't pan out, he served as the head of Trump's White House transition team, at least until he was fired. And that is according to Chris Christie for clashing with Jared Kushner. And thus began the next phase of Chris Christie's career. He became a network news contributor, getting a constant source of income for opining on Trump and bashing the administration from a safe distance. And it seemed, at least for a while, that Christie had become a firm never-Trumper. Until, again, after years of attacks from news studios, Christie stopped hitting Trump, stepped back into the D.C. spotlight, and emerged as none other than chief organizer of Donald Trump's 2020 debate prep team, working with then-president to take down Joe Biden in front of a national audience. And then, after Trump lost, guess what happened? You know where this is going. Christie flipped again, not only calling Trump a danger to American democracy, but also finding new ways to profit from his newfound Trump criticism. And despite not being a relevant member of the GOP for years, and despite his on-again, off-again relationship with Trump, Chris Christie wrote a book declaring that the post-2020 Republican Party had to move on from Trump if it was ever going to succeed again. It is hard to keep track of Chris Christie's allegiances unless, that is, you follow the money. When it is lucrative for Christie, guess what he does? He hugs Trump. He embraces him. When it's lucrative for Christie, he bashes Trump, hates on him. So forgive me for not believing that Chris Christie, whether he admits it or not, wants to torpedo Trump's electoral chances because he cares about our republic or our democracy. No, he cares about his bottom line. And for my 2 cents, I think his run is an effort to cling on to any kind of relevancy in this country. If he runs and he hits Trump, I don't know, maybe he can get another TV gig somewhere. Maybe he can write another book, get some paid speeches under his belt. He can keep reaping the benefits of the Never Trump movement, even if he's made it clear multiple times now that he is not a Never Trumper. He's just a sometimes never, other times okay Trumper. I am begging the news media to do me a favor and look beyond the zingers and Trump attacks and ask Chris Christie, actually, what is he doing in this race? Because his track record has proven he is not capable of being an actual Trump slayer. He's never acted like a patriot, selfless soldier that some paint him to be.
He had Mohyeldin that had an important message to journalists. Don't just listen to the whips that you're going to hear from Christie. Don't just listen to those one-liners and those zippers that you're going to hear. Put him to the task, because after all, it seems like in his case, knowing he can't win, he's looking to say, follow the money. This is just another income stream for Chris Christie. So as people are going to try to give him a notion that somehow he is going to be there to really challenge Trump, remember, the guy's likely there just to take the money. A lot of money involved in being that person that's going to get a lot of screen time, as he has some one-line zingers against Trump. Media, as Mohyeldin says, don't fall for it. Do your job. Media, do your job. Media, do your job. Anyway, folks, 713-526-5738. We still have some time to get more calls. 713-526-5738. Hit extension number 2 to be on air, and you will be on air. Remember, this is your show. You have the option to change the subject. 713-526-5738. I haven't heard much from our control room, so therefore, El Senor Howard, any comments? Or Senor Van Beber, any comments before I go to the other subject?
Oh, I'm just sitting in here sleeping. You're actually going to wake me up and make me work?
I am going to wake you up and make you work, brother.
Well, it was good to hear from Tory this morning. He had some interesting points.
He always have interesting points. That's Brother Tory for you.
Jack, what you got going on, man?
Man,
come on up here.
Let me clear my throat.
We're as we wait for Jack to clear his throat, and as we wait for callers at 713-526-5738 extension 2, Jack says what?
Well, it's just actually. Let me wait on commenting this. I'm confused. I'm confused a little bit now. I'm thinking about it. So let me think about it a little bit.
Okay. Well, as you think about it, we'll go ahead and have a commentary that I really want to say about this. There's a group called New Labels that's thinking about putting some more. That's putting up a candidate to run as a third party. And we don't know who is funding New Labels. We don't know where all the money. These guys have a lot of money. A third party an organization trying to launch a third party has a lot of money. And we also have a lot of new people going into the Republican race. I want everybody to think about this. We know that Donald Trump is very dominant in this space. He's very dominant, and his people are going to stick with him. But people were staying out of the race. But suddenly people are starting to come into the race. I think the undercurrent is there that the guy's going to get indicted, that things are going to make it seem that he's vulnerable. and that some one of these guys are going to come out ahead. And I think New Labels is coming into the fold, not to possibly give Trump a second term, but to ensure that a Democrat and the progressive movement is stalled. This is all playing a game with the electorate. New Labels is not there to try to re-elect Donald Trump or to try to get a third-party candidate, which has never worked and likely will never work in the current setup, the way our duopoly is set up. But what they can ensure is that the progressive mission is stalled. And that is exactly what I think is occurring here. Trump is not going to win again. In fact, Trump may not even win. You know, I think Democrats are being fooled into believing that this is going to be a Biden-Trump race. First of all, I think we should have fresh blood all around, but seems like we won't. But I think we will have fresh blood on the Republican side. And I think the reason to bring in a third-party vote is to ensure that that new Republican person will win to stunt the progressive movement. This is chess playing. And one of the reasons No Labels, you can't find who's donating to them, should scare the bejesus out of folks. And it is important now that what we do is educate, and educate folks as far as what they're trying to do with our body politic. I think it's important. Go ahead, Howard.
Well, if you recall Ross the Boss, Ross Perot, yes, he's the one who ran as a third-party candidate, which split the Republican conservative vote, and that's how we got Bill Clinton. What True. If they try to run this person up against Joe Biden, whoever they choose, well, it's going to split the vote for the Democratic side, which ensures probably a Ron DeSantis presidency.
There you go.
You total disaster.
You nailed it.
They're already stripping our rights away from us, right and left. So we won't have any rights left. So if they decide to run a conservative candidate to split the Republican ticket, which they could very easily do, then we are assured a Biden presidency for the second time.
Right.
So the third-party candidates really just split the ticket on which side they're gambling on. So
and let me just forewarn you, Howard.
Go ahead.
Think about this, Howard. Guess who they're thinking about running?
Oh, I don't know.
Manchin from West Virginia. Think about that. So that puts into perspective what you just said.
Well, yeah, that's exactly what they're planning to do. If they're going to run a Democratic candidate, they'll just split the ticket that way.
There you go.
Therefore, it ensures a Republican presidency. Same thing that happened with the original George Bush up against Ross the Boss, because a lot of people voted for Ross the Boss and split that ticket, and that's how we got Bill Clinton. So it's very easy to see what they're doing.
Yes.
And you've got to be very, very careful in what you do when you do something like that.
You nailed it. You nailed it. Let me get the last video in here. It's going to be just up on our closing time, and you're going to kick me off after. So let me get this one going, and we'll take it on the other side, my brother. Okay, I thought I had it going. There you go. You have to see this because it shows you how revisionist history comes about. I want you guys to check this out, and then we'll take it on the other side.
Hearings on Capitol Hill sometimes include, let's just say, odd moments. But yesterday, we saw something just straight up bizarre during a hearing of the Senate's Health, Education, Labor, and Pensions Committee, when one Republican senator decided to go after a children's book.
The book here in front of me called Our Skin that has been endorsed by NACI. And I'm going to read exactly what this book says. You guys might find it interesting. A long time ago, way before you were born, a group of white people made up an idea called race. They sorted people by skin color and said that white people were better, smarter, prettier, and they deserved more than everybody else. This would be taught. If we socialize our pre-K system, this would be taught.
Do you disagree with that findings in the book?
1,000%. How about we teach Jesus loves me? How about this? And teaching Jesus loves the little children, the lyrics go, red and yellow, black and white, they're all precious in our sight. Someone point at me that this being a truth, that white people developed race, that white people developed that all of a sudden that was our word that we developed.
The shouty gentleman demanding to know whether it's better to teach Jesus loves me or a Christian children's song, or Our Skin, a first conversation about race, which is a children's book about race, is Mark Wayne Mullen, a former cage fighter turned Republican senator from Oklahoma, who I should note claims Cherokee heritage and pointed that out in the hearing. It was kind of a dumb question, though, right? I mean, you wouldn't teach a Jesus song in a public elementary school because, well, it's not Sunday school. It's not church. It's a school. And there are likely kids in that school who aren't Christian, don't know who Jesus is, and don't care. And their parents, who might be Buddhist or Jewish or Muslim or atheists, etc., have a right to not have their kids' teachers preach the Jesus to them. But the other reason why what the senator said is dumb is that the scary book that he waved around is correct on the facts. Allow me to quote the historians from the Smithsonian's National Museum of African American History and Culture right here in the nation's capital. Quote, before the mid-1600s, there is no evidence that the English referred to themselves as being white people. This concept did not occur until 1613, when the English society first encountered and contrasted themselves against the East Indians through their colonial pursuits. Even then, there was not a large body of people who considered themselves white, as we know the term today. From about the 1550s to 1600, white was exclusively used to describe elite English women because the whiteness of their skin signaled that they were persons of a high social class who did not go outside to labor. However, the term white did not refer to elite English men because the idea that men did not leave their homes to work could signal that they were lazy, sick, or unproductive. European colonists' use of the word white to refer to people who looked like themselves grew to become entangled with the word race and slave in the American colonies in the mid-1660s. These elites created races of savage Indians, subhuman Africans, and white men. The social inventions succeeded in uniting the white colonists, dispossessing and marginalizing native people, and permanently enslaving most African-descended people for generations, unquote. So the answer to your silly question, Senator, the book best used, the book that's best to use if you want to talk to kids about race is the actual book about race that's grounded in historical fact. Because trust me, kids know that race is a thing. But feel free to sing the Jesus song to your kids at home.
Yeah, if you want to sing the Jesus song to your kid, please feel free to do it. But don't try to deny history. You know, the biggest problem is, I think, with those people that don't want to learn don't want history taught to them, is that they want to take it personally. Look, I don't know what my forefathers, whomever they are, and by the way, look, just about every black person in America is mixed with a whole lot of stuff, okay? Just as I am. So my forefathers are many, okay? But of course, for those presenting what they call presenting black, I don't know what those forefathers have all done. You don't personalize this stuff. What you do is you learn from what folks have done and you make sure not to repeat the mistakes of your forefathers. That's all one can do. You can't be blamed for what your forefathers have done. No, you can't. And I'm running out of time. So I want to thank Jack Van Beber in the studio, as well as the one and only Howard Reynolds. Thank you so kindly, everybody that's listening. My name is Egberto Willis. This is Politics and Right. And you guys know how I end this, baby. I am what? Out. We spend a lot of time deconstructing the news, trying to parse it into a form that everybody can understand. We try to find those little nitpicks where it flies above the fray, etc. If you really like these videos that we do, I want to ask a big favor. Please go ahead. Number one, subscribe to our channel. And number two, please join if you can. Thank you so kindly for watching. Keep watching. Please remember to share. We must populate the entire internet with our progressive message, a message that we know is what most Americans say that they want. So help us, please join.